Hey, Wayne and John. Okay, so this ghost talk makes me want to talk about demons. And I think it's because maybe growing up as a little Baptist boy, the assumption was that whenever ghosts showed up, it was because they were actually demons. Like the idea that mainstream culture could have an idea like ghosts and be right about it was not permissible. And so naturally we had to have our biblical category, which was demons, to be able to like say, okay, those ghosts that you're experiencing or those spirits you're interacting with, obviously they're demons because demons get mentioned a lot. And so we have a whole structure for demonology, or I guess like demon mythology perhaps. And so we can take those ghost stories and jam them into our little like nice neat demon containers. And John, I like the fact that you actually made space for the ghost stories in scripture. But it still does beg the question, why don't we see the same type of demonic activity today that we used to see in the Bible? Now, full disclosure, since I am a North American who was born in the 1980s, post Industrial Revolution, post Enlightenment, I'm going to be bringing probably some of my own baggage and skew with me. And so naturally, there are going to be parts of the world that say, oh, what are you talking about? Demons are showing up in our communities exactly like they showed up in Jesus's community. Unfortunately, when I look at my own experience, that has not been the case. There have been a few spots where people were like, whoa, that was totally demonic activity. And in those cases, I'm like, well, was that just a dramatic teenager? Or was that someone getting caught up in the middle of like some Pentecostal fervor where they fell down and started saying some weird stuff? Like literally when I was in the Dominican Republic and people were like, whoa, did you see the way that that demon started manifesting with that girl? Did you hear the way that her voice changed? I'm like, well, it kind of just sounded like she was talking weird. Like it sounded like her normal voice, but she was doing a, like a type of thing. And I just made that sound, and that doesn't mean I'm possessed by a demon. So maybe it's like I guess that's the thing I have to disclaim with. Maybe it's my own like skeptical bias. But I think I found a solution, and I think the solution is math. And the reason that it's math is I think because if we grant the premise of like our Christian mythology about the demons, and I'll kind of unpack some of that later, then I think the reason we see less demonic activity is sort of like a human resources problem for demons, or I guess if they're not humans, it's a spiritual resources department issue for demons. Demonic resources? Well, I don't know what their department would be called. I'm sure they're not worried about the labels. And to support this claim that it's mostly a demonic resources issue, or human resources issue, or a numbers issue, or a math issue, is I'm gonna like cite two main claims of Christianity. So, the claim number one: Satan is not omnipresent. If Satan is a fallen angel of some sort, as Christian mythology teaches, then Satan is a finite being. Satan cannot be everywhere. Satan is not omnipresent. I actually had a theology professor that liked to say omnipresent. It has a fun ring to it, but omnipresent. Satan can't be everywhere. And so, like, obviously his minions, the other demons that followed him in the fall, they can't be omnipresent either. Right, we have to remember that we as Christians are not Zoroastrians. We do not believe that there are two equal gods warring for this world, but rather there is one supreme God and there is a subordinate evil of some sort. So Satan isn't omnipresent, and neither are his demons. And the second thing that we're going to borrow from Christian mythology is that demons are about 1/3 of the angelic beings that God created in the beginning. We get this mostly from the book of Enoch, the book of Watchers, where there was 1/3 of the angels that liked humans, and so then they fell. And I know the book of Enoch is not in the Bible, but neither is most of our demonic ideology. If we only use what scripture explicitly teaches, we're going to get very little about Satan and demons. So we're going to borrow from the Christian, I guess, mythology that says that about 1/3 of these demons fell. That could be metaphorical, that could be literal, but whatever it is, there was a finite number of demons that fell. God created a finite number of spirit beings in the beginning, and we don't have any inclination that these spirit beings can reproduce, and so there's a finite number of these beings. 1/3 of those beings fell. And by me mentioning a finite number of demons, I think you're going to be kind of onto where I'm going with this. If there's a finite number of demons, and there are about 7+ billion people in the world today, it would make sense that when we compare that number to the number of people that were in the world in the first century when all these demonic things were happening around the ministry of Jesus, it would make sense that we're going to see a difference, guys. John, you'll have to correct me if there's like other like cool Catholic doctrines or ideologies that I'm missing, because I am a simple Baptist raised boy who went to a Wesleyan university and now teaches in a Presbyterian church. So I do not have exhaustive ecumenical knowledge. But it seems to me that we don't really know if God created a finite number of angels, but we would hope that he's not creating more demons. And if he is making more angels and more of those angels are falling, well, like, let's hope he'd put out like a PSA of some sort to be like, attention, another third of the angels fell and you're going to have some increased demonic activity. But barring that sort of situation, if there are about 7 billion people in the world today plus, and there were, according to like some of the historical estimates, and by that I mean what Google told me when I checked it, that in the first century there were between 170 and 300 million people. That means that today we have about 26 times the number of people. Now 26 doesn't sound like a big number, but if we put it in percentage, that's 2,600% more people than we had back in the past. And if the number of demons is the same, that means there is a 2,600% reduction in demonic oppression. So it would make sense that Jesus would come across a guy in a graveyard who's naked and possessed with a legion of demons. 1,000 or maybe more demons living in this guy because they had plenty of demons to go around. It would make sense that when Jesus is ministering, all sorts of demons are going to be popping up, like doing the resistance thing. And in all fairness, maybe like some of the demonic language was overused in the first century. Like maybe someone with epilepsy, they were like, oh, he has a spirit that makes him fall down on the ground and shake every once in a while. So maybe that person had epilepsy. But like even barring those things, just the sheer number of people versus the number of demons is going to shift the amount of demonic oppression, manifestation, activity that we experience in the world today. And the reason I'm bringing this up is not just so that like I can play a fun math game and be like, cool, so we're going to expect less demonic activity in the world today. And naturally, I'm like hearing the voices in my head of the people who would be like, well, that's just what the devil wants you to believe, is that the demons aren't active anymore so that they can actually pull the strings. But like you can't fight the math unless there's like some secret like demon spawner that's like cranking out more of these guys. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is not just so that we can have fun games with math, but like, I don't know, maybe we're overusing the excuse that the enemy, like specifically like that metaphysical spiritual enemy, is to blame for a lot of the things going on in the world today. Maybe there are like psychological and sociological factors that are feeding into the evil things that happen in our world. Like maybe redemption and sanctification for us in the modern era has to do with like, I don't know, getting therapy, dealing with our mommy and daddy issues, and like confronting the darkness that maybe is in there even without any external help from spiritual forces and beings. And don't hear what I'm not saying. Like, I'm not saying that there aren't like these other metaphysical forces, and some of them might be dark and evil and working against God. Like, I think that totally is a thing, and it's something that we should pray against and work against as Christians, and be committed in the spiritual realm to battle against those forces, whatever that means. But I think for me, like when I'm having a bad day, I think it's just as valuable for me to investigate like the things going on inside of my family, what I had for breakfast that day, the way that I'm coping with my stress, maybe the undealt with trauma from my childhood. Maybe it's equally valid to deal with that stuff in addition to praying and asking God for deliverance from these forces of darkness. So yes, Jon and Wayne, maybe there are like these persistent spirits that are still around of people who were once alive and who are gone, just like we see in the story with Samuel and the Witch of Endor, or like even Elijah and Moses as they appear in the Transfiguration, that there are people who were once alive who are still somehow accessible in very rare and special cases. And like Wayne, I know you love the ghost hunting, and so maybe that stuff is like just people, stuff floating in the air. And maybe some of the weird metaphysical things that we can't explain are, in fact, evil spirits manifesting. But if we're playing a sheer numbers game and we're comparing our lives to the pages of Scripture, maybe we should expect a 2,600% reduction in the amount of demonic activity that we experience in the world today. And I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse, but it definitely makes me feel more grounded and validated in my own experience of reality, where a lot of these things feel like they can be explained by looking at my own psychology, sociology, family structure, and life experiences, which I think God is very involved with. So maybe some of it's demons, and maybe some of it's ghosts, and maybe some of it is actually most of it is it's probably just me. Or maybe it's the collective contributions of people like you guys in my life. So, Wayne and John, love you guys. See you next time.